High above the earth, a silent chess match was about to play out, a confrontation with the power to tip the scales of global influence. President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso was en route to Moscow, a diplomatic journey carrying the hopes of a nation seeking its own path. But when American and French fighter jets suddenly swarmed his plane, a bold move turned into a breathtaking high-stakes drama. What unfolded next would send ripples across the world, heralding a challenge to the old order. The morning sun cast a bright glow over Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. Inside the presidential palace, President Ibrahim Traoré meticulously reviewed the final details of his upcoming trip. This wasn't just any state visit. He was personally invited by President Vladimir Putin to Moscow to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Allied victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. A grand military parade in Red Square awaited, a potent display of Russian heritage and resilience. For President Traoré, this journey was monumental. It was far more than attending a historical commemoration. It was a declaration. Since assuming office, he had poured his energy into carving out true autonomy for Burkina Faso, steering his nation away from the long shadow of Western powers. His burgeoning relationship with Russia was viewed by many as a courageous stride towards genuine independence, a direct challenge to the former colonial forces that had for so long dictated Africa's fate. Across the Atlantic, this shift did not go unnoticed. Washington and Paris, with their deep-rooted interest in Africa, watched with growing unease. They'd made their disapproval of Burkina Faso's alignment with Russia known. In hushed, stern meetings, American and French diplomats had delivered veiled warnings. Any actions perceived as undermining their regional influence would be met with consequences. As President Traoré prepared to board his flight, he knew this was more than a diplomatic mission. It was a crucible, a test of wills against the giants who had dominated the African continent for generations. Would they permit him to reach Moscow and make a statement? Or would they resort to any means necessary to thwart this audacious assertion of sovereignty? The moment his plane lifted off from Ouagadougou, the air felt charged. The stakes, President Traoré understood, were immense. His crew, briefed and vigilant, knew this flight could be dangerously interrupted. Gazing out the window at the receding African landscape, a tapestry of his homeland, he felt the weight of the new chapter he was determined to write for Burkina Faso. But the skies above, he would soon discover, were about to become a battleground. Hours into the flight, an uneasy calm settled. President Traoré's plane sliced smoothly through the upper atmosphere, the engines drone a steady rhythm. Then, as they traversed the vast Atlantic, a chilling sight bloomed on the radar. 2 unidentified blips, closing in fast. The flight crew stiffened. Their trained eyes recognized the ominous silhouettes instantly. Military jets, American and French, on an intercept course. At first, a flicker of hope, perhaps a mistake, a misidentification. But as the fighter jets drew menacingly closer, their intentions became terrifyingly clear. This was no error. This was a deliberate interception. President Traoré sat in steely silence, his gaze fixed on the approaching aircraft, his mind a whirlwind. He had anticipated opposition, but a direct aerial blockade? This was a brazen escalation. The radio crackled to life. A harsh, authoritative voice from the U.S. military cut through the tension. This is a restricted airspace. You are ordered to land immediately. Repeat, land immediately. President Traoré leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. This wasn't a mere misunderstanding. It was a gauntlet thrown down. The United States and France were unequivocally attempting to scuttle his mission to Russia to silence his voice at the Moscow celebration. But Ibrahim Traoré was not a man who backed down. His pilots exchanged tense glances, awaiting his command. The sovereignty of his nation, the powerful message he carried, these were too vital to be choked off by foreign intimidation. He watched the Western jets maneuver, boxing his plane. "I will not land," President Traoré stated, his voice quiet but unyielding to his captain. "Continue on course. We are not diverting." The crew nodded, a silent pact of resolve. This was more than a flight. It was a stand. The risk of escalation hung heavy in the pressurized cabin. Then, just as the tension seemed unbearable, a new, thunderous roar ripped through the airwaves, from an entirely different direction. On the radar, a squadron of Russian fighter jets materialized, streaking in with decisive speed to provide an aerial escort. As the Russian Sukhois flew in tight formation, a clear message of protection. The Western pilots were forced into a sudden, stark reassessment. They had come to halt Traoré's flight. But now they faced the formidable presence of the Russian Air Force, a nation not easily cowed. After what felt like an eternity of charged silence and high-stakes negotiation conducted via tense radio calls between the military commands, the American and French forces reluctantly, grudgingly, backed down. Their jets peeled away, retreating from the airspace, leaving President Traoré's plane to continue its passage to Moscow. The immediate standoff was over, but the shockwaves of this audacious encounter would resonate for years, a testament to a shifting world. Though the imminent danger had passed, the hours that followed the dramatic interception were thick with the gravity of what had transpired. President Traoré's plane, once surrounded, now flew under protective wing of Russian escorts. He had faced down two global superpowers, and with Russia's decisive intervention, he had prevailed. This flight to Moscow had transformed into a potent symbol of defiance, an undeniable statement that Burkina Faso would no longer be dictated to. As the aircraft continued its journey, President Traoré knew the world was watching, even if the full details of the aerial drama remained veiled in official silence for a time. Hours later, his plane touched down smoothly at Vnukovo International Airport in Moscow. The sight of Russian officials, President Vladimir Putin among them, waiting on the tarmac, was a profound affirmation. The handshake between the two leaders was firm, a silent acknowledgement of the extraordinary events that had bound them. "Welcome to Russia, President Traoré," Putin said, his voice calm. "It's a privilege to have you here." "Thank you, President Putin," Traoré replied, the weight of the moment palpable. "It's an honor." His arrival coincided with Russia's solemn 80th anniversary commemoration of victory in World War II. Standing in Red Square, watching the formidable military parade, Traoré saw more than a display of Russian strength. He saw the resilience of nations that had endured history's fiercest trials yet stood unbowed. Russia has always stood against imperialism. Traoré remarked quietly to Putin, "This is what Africa needs. The courage to stand firm, the will to protect our sovereignty." Putin nodded. "You are right, President Traoré. The struggle for sovereignty is unending. But those who stand firm find their place in history. Russia stand with you." While the dramatic sky-high confrontation might not have made global headlines, its impact was undeniable. In the days that followed, during meetings and ceremonial events, the air was thick with unspoken understanding. Russia had publicly demonstrated its unwavering support for Burkina Faso. President Putin extended a significant invitation. "I would like to extend an invitation not just to you, but to the people of Africa. If you wish, we can build a stronger partnership. Let this be the beginning of a new chapter of cooperation." Traoré, moved, responded, "This invitation represents more than politics. It represents the future we are building, a future where African nations can choose their own path without fear or interference." His visit culminated in a powerful public speech to Russian and African diplomats. "We are no longer afraid of standing alone," Traoré declared, his voice ringing with conviction. "Today we stand with Russia, not as subjects, but as equals. We call on all African nations to join us in the struggle for a future where our sovereignty is never again in question." The applause was thunderous. A spark of hope, of Pan-African unity, had been ignited. The message was clear. Africa was rising, demanding its rightful place. Months turned into years. While the specifics of the aerial standoff remained largely outside the public domain, its ripple effects were profound. President Traoré's courage became legendary across Africa, inspiring a renewed push for true independence. Diplomatic and economic ties between African nations and Russia strengthened. Burkina Faso, once isolated, forged new alliances not just with Russia, but with other global powers, building a future based on mutual respect. The Western powers, though publicly silent about their thwarted interception, did not forget. Economic pressures on Burkina Faso mounted. Yet, President Traoré remained steadfast, convinced that Africa's future lay in self-reliance and unity, not dependency. His leadership continued to inspire. The flight to Moscow became a beacon, a symbol of a new Africa, united, strong, and determined. The call for African unity grew louder. The continent's voice, once suppressed, now resonated with power. President Ibrahim Traoré, guardian of his nation's future, had shown the world that Africa's destiny was its own to shape. The struggle was far from over, but a new path had been irrevocably cleared. This extraordinary chain of events underscores the shifting tides of global power and the unwavering spirit of nations striving for self-determination. What are your thoughts on President Traoré's bold stand and the implications for international relations? Share your opinions in the comments below. And if you found this story compelling, please subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more narratives that explore the pivotal moments shaping our world.